Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler on with you today. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really happy to be back with you today. For those of you who are regular listeners, you probably noticed for the last few weeks I've replayed some older episodes, some episodes that people had gotten a lot of value out of and really enjoyed. So while I was taking a little break here, I decided to reshare those episodes. But what I wanted to talk a bit about today was the reason for that break. And some of you may already be aware, I've posted a bit on social media or talked about it in some of my programs, but for some of you, this will probably be news and first time you're hearing this, but my wife and I recently had our first child. So just really, really happy about that. We've been celebrating that and not just celebrating, but, staying up all night and surviving it. So it's been a little bit of an adventure, a crossing of a certain threshold. It's been interesting. I had an experience. I couldn't say exactly when it was, but one of these days or, maybe over a few days as we were crossing this threshold, but just suddenly realizing that life is never going to be the same again and that I'm not the person that I was even just a few weeks ago. The last time I recorded this podcast live, I'm not the same person I was then. And it's just a really, really trippy experience how, something can happen in life. The birth of a child, a relationship, an illness, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, right? But something can happen in your life and then all of a sudden you're not the same person anymore. And you'll never be that same person again. And you look at who you were just maybe a few hours ago and you go, that person is gone and that person is gone forever. And that's been what's happening for me over the last few weeks. Really stepping into this new version of myself, this new person I am. I've never been a father before, and now I am. I have a daughter now, and that's profound and exciting and terrifying and all of it, right? All of it. Those of you who are parents, or any of you who have crossed any kind of threshold like this in your life, then you know what I'm talking about, where suddenly everything changes and you're no longer the person that you used to be, and you'll never be that person again. So that kind of sparked the idea for what I'm doing today. And so the title of this episode is going to be Shane's Diary Entry Number 1. And I thought as I step into fatherhood, as I step into this new version of myself and this new chapter of my life, I'd like to document the journey, and I'd like to not just document it for myself, but document it with you. So you can hear the journey, so you can hear my own insights. And so I can come to you not just as a teacher or as a coach or as an educator, but I can come to you as a human being and share not just, what I coached a client on or what I've, been thinking about or the insights I've had in terms of how it relates to you, but also how it relates to me. What is my growth, my expansion, my experience, my lessons? What am I currently integrating in my life? What's showing up for me? What are my challenges, my fears, my struggles, and how am I working through that? And I thought it would be great once a month to record an episode like this and just share a little bit behind the curtain on what's happening in my life. How am I evolving? How am I growing? What am I learning? What am I working through? So this will be entry number 1. And there will be more to come. So like I said, probably once a month, I'll record these episodes and just little diary entries that I'm going to record for myself and for you. And as I continue to share, answers to your questions and address the common topics and struggles and things around conscious love that you're used to coming to this podcast for, I'm also going to include these episodes. And this may be about relationships. It might be about my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my daughter. It might be about different things that are happening in my life, but maybe it won't be about relationships at all. Maybe it'll be about my spiritual realizations, or maybe it'll be about different challenges or things that are in my life. But this is just going to be a space for us to get to know each other a little better. And for you to, again, get that peek behind the curtain and see, my process, my learning, my growth as I come here each week and I share advice and support and information for you to enhance your life. I also want you to see how I'm integrating the things that I teach in my life. So this is entry number 1. I look forward to these episodes. I think they're going to be fun. It's going to stretch me and challenge me a little bit to be a little more vulnerable, a little more personal. I think I thrive as a teacher. That's something that has always come naturally to me. I have a way of being able to understand information, integrate it, and then put it back out there in a way that people understand it. That's pretty easy for me to do. But I think sharing my heart, my vulnerabilities is a little more of a challenge. So I'm going to stretch myself with that too. And as I was thinking about what I want to include in this first diary entry, obviously reflections on fatherhood and how these first couple of weeks as a father has changed me and how I expect it to continue to change me. But honestly, I don't know much about being a father yet. I know that we got to wake up a lot at night to feed the baby and, rock her back to sleep. I know, maybe a few basic things about taking care of a baby, but I haven't experienced being a father for that long. So I don't have a lot to share about fatherhood other than it's terrifying. There's this little being who is completely dependent, and God, I love her more than anything in the world. And I got to make sure she stays alive and, hopefully not just stays alive, but is happy and feels loved and feels safe and feels supported. And given the work that I do, so much of this work has over the years taken me deeper and deeper into exploring trauma, exploring how our early experiences shape our narratives of life and relationships and others and our identity and our sense of self. And I've worked with so many clients on their relationship with their father, their relationship with their parents, and how those relationships shaped them and their sense of self. And I've done so much reflection, and I've spent a lot of time in therapy myself, just really understanding how my formative relationships with my parents shaped me. And now I have this head full of information and, these years of experience of working with all these people around their relationship with their parents and their trauma. And now I'm here holding this little baby, and I'm potently aware of the fact that everything I do is going to impact her identity and her sense of self and her relationships in some way. And that's a little intimidating, a little scary. I'll also say that I feel ready for it, and that's something that I'm very grateful for. There was a time that I wasn't ready for it. I remember I was maybe 24 years old with one of my exes, and she got pregnant, and she ended up having an abortion. But I think about if I had become a father at that time, I would not have been ready in the way that I am now. And God bless that little soul who was wanting to come into the world at the time. I don't know who that soul was, or I don't know what that was about other than the fact that we just were not ready to be parents. But I know that if that child had come into the world at that time, I would not have been able to be the father that I am able to be now. And I definitely have some regrets and some lingering feelings around how all of that went down. And it definitely was not ideal. It wasn't what I would have wanted for myself or her or for the child, but it, I'm grateful now that I'm stepping into this in a place where I feel truly ready for it. And I feel like I'm in a place where I am prepared to nurture a soul on their human journey. And I'm grateful also to have a daughter. You know, my work is mostly with women. I definitely coach a handful of men, and I really enjoy coaching men. I will continue to do that for as long as men continue coming to me. But, you know, on any given week, I probably work with 20 to 30 or more women. I'm pretty busy working with women. And I think that's just become a passion of mine, you know, being raised by a single mother, growing up with 4 sisters, you know, loving my wife, and just, I think always I've loved women for whatever reason. You know, maybe it was because of my mother, maybe it was because of my sisters. I don't really know, but I've always just felt connected to women in that way. And I think it's very appropriate that now I have the gift and the blessing of being able to raise a daughter. And I'm aware that I'm the first man that she'll ever know. So in a way, I'm setting the standard for what a man is in her life. And my goal, my aim with her is that when she gets to the point where she is ready to date a man, if she chooses to date men, maybe she won't, but however her relationships with men show up throughout her life, my goal and my aim is that she has a very high standard for what men are to her. That I get to set the standard for what it means to be present in her life, for what it means to be emotionally available to her, for what it means to give her permission to have all of her emotions and all of her experiences, and to feel loved and held and accepted through all of it, to not feel any sense of shame or that any part of her is unacceptable or inappropriate, to not feel that she needs to be boxed into a certain idea of who a girl or a woman is supposed to be, and rather create a safe space that fosters her full, authentic expression and gives her permission to be who she wants to be, this little soul, this little life that is emerging through her. What does that want to become? And my job isn't to force her into what I think she's supposed to be, as maybe my parents did to me in a lot of ways, and your parents probably did to you. But my job is to nurture and create a safe space for her self-expression, for her to become the most authentic version of herself, and to be present in her life, and to be available to her, and to be safe to her, and to have her really know on a visceral, somatic level what it feels like to be loved by a man. And that will become the standard for what she accepts from men throughout her life. And I feel really blessed and really honored to get to hold that space for her. I'm also kind of amazed, you know, when my wife got pregnant and we were discussing having a baby and all of this happening, I said, I can't believe they're going to let me do this. I don't know who they are, but it's kind of a joke. But, you know, as much as I feel ready for it, and I truly believe I am ready, I don't think I could be more ready than I am now. At the same time, it's interesting, and maybe this is part of that identity crumbling when I said, like, I'll never be the person I was before, because I haven't really thought of myself ever as a father. And so many of my clients and friends and people in my life have said, you know, oh, well, how lucky she is to have you for a father. And, you know, what a blessing this girl is going to, you know, be to have a father like you. And I really appreciate that when people say that. But it's funny because I've never thought of myself as a father. And I think, you know, we all kind of have this where there's an identity that's created when we're younger, and there's a certain way that we begin to think about ourselves and see ourselves. And that just becomes the way we think about ourselves. And father was never really part of that image for me. And maybe I'm stepping into that now, and maybe that's the part of me that's dying. The part of me that no longer gets to exist is the part that wasn't a father, because now I am. But it's interesting. And I think about my relationship with my parents, with my father, with my mother, and how I grew up and the impressions that were left with me because of them, and the life trajectory that I took because of those impressions. And my journey, and some of you, I mean, I've shared a little bit of my story over the years on this podcast here and there, but I don't think I've ever really shared it all in one place before. And maybe I'll do a little of that today, just share a little bit about my journey to even get here and who I am as I'm stepping into this, and where I've come from. Because, my journey is addiction, jail, relationship chaos. I mean, I've always been a bit of a rebel. I've always kind of gone against the grain or resisted the norm of things and the conventional life of mother, father, home, white picket fence type thing. That's never who I've been. That's never how I've seen myself. And yet here I am, everything except the white picket fence. We have a black aluminum fence, but here I am living this life that I never thought was for me, that I never thought was where I was headed. And I think that's a testament to what healing looks like and what surrender looks like, because I think left to my own devices, I don't know that I would be here. When I met my wife, it's funny. I was, when I met my wife, I had just gotten out of this 6-month entanglement with this woman, and we were trying to do an open relationship kind of thing. And it was a chaotic mess. I mean, I really don't recommend it. Maybe some of us need to go through that journey, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think at a certain point, we mature to the level where we realize that we don't want the chaos of trying to navigate different relationships with different people. We want the safety and the security of knowing that we have a home in someone, knowing that we have a safe space to be ourselves. And I think that's what, in a way, going back to what I was saying with my daughter, I think that's what I can create for her, right? Is I can create this safe space, this blueprint for relationships that is safe, that is whole. So maybe she doesn't need to experience the kind of chaos that I needed to experience, because she already knows what safety feels like. She's already integrated that into her body, and she can surrender into that a lot more easily than I was able to, more easily than my wife was able to. But I say all this to say that, when I met my wife, I was thinking I don't want a monogamous commitment. I want an open relationship, and I want to live this, different kind of lifestyle. And there was something that I experienced with my wife that just felt right. And maybe I had done enough healing by that time. I mean, I had spent years in spiritual communities and transformational seminars, and I was, beginning my coaching practice, and, I had come a long way. And so maybe there was enough of me that had been healed that even though I had a certain mental idea of what I wanted it to be, or what I thought it was going to be, or what I thought it was supposed to look like, when I felt what I felt with my wife, when I felt that resonance and that attunement, I said yes. I said yes to that. And along those lines, when I met my wife, it was really important for her to have a child. And that wasn't something that I really thought I wanted. I had come up in a world of transformational training and personal development work where most of my role models were in their 50s and 60s, and they had never had children, and they were traveling the world leading seminars and trainings and things like that. And I kind of thought that would be my life trajectory, right? I didn't want to be tied down, so to speak. I wanted to be on the road, be living out of hotel rooms, be, doing that kind of life. And my wife wanted to put down roots, and she wanted to have children. And again, it wasn't necessarily my idea of what I thought was where I was going, but there was something about it that felt right, and I trusted that. And it's interesting to see how, as we heal, as we grow more into ourselves and more into our truth, and as we start to regulate our nervous systems and we start to feel safe inside of our own bodies, we start to listen to what the body says. And so even though the mind might have ideas of, grandiose visions of everything I've been describing, open relationships and travel and being, whatever it might look like or whatever we might think it looks like, the body has its own truth. And when we can start to listen to what the body says, we can start to listen to the truth. The body wants security. The body wants safety. The body wants a place to call home. And I realized that everything that I thought I was chasing was an egoic idea of who I thought I was supposed to be to validate some kind of emptiness in myself. Maybe the fragmented identity of never feeling loved when I was younger, of growing up in trauma and addiction and going to jail and never feeling safe. And I thought I needed to collect all of these relationships and all of these experiences to validate something within me that felt broken. But as I started to realize that I wasn't broken, a lot of that other stuff lost its pull. And I'm not saying that I would never do a training or I would never travel or I need to sit home 24/7. I'm not saying, I still have visions of ways I want to expand. And I would love to get to a place where I'm leading in-person seminars again. And that's, once we get integrated with the family, that's something I'm going to be maybe looking at putting together at some point. But the need isn't there like it used to be. There's a piece with who I am and where I am now. And whatever I do, I might do it out of service because I'm excited about the way that I could serve people. I'm excited about the impact or the difference I could make or the connection that I could experience. I'm excited about the opportunity and the growth that might come from it. But none of it's about validating my ego anymore. None of it's about validating something within me that feels broken and trying to overcompensate with experiences to validate something in me. And I think that's the gift that healing offers us. Now with my daughter, I can be really present with her. I can be available to her. I can show up for her in her life and not always have something unresolved within me that's pulling me away from her, like my parents had. I look at my mother and my father, and they weren't the worst parents in the world, but I'll be honest, they weren't the best either. And I don't want to sit here and talk bad about either of them. But I think I just want to share a little bit about what's real, about what's true. And today, I don't really have much of a relationship with either of them. My father is someone that I would pretty confidently say is a full-blown narcissist. He introduced me to a life of drugs and alcohol and things when I was 13 years old. Gave me my first beer, gave me my first joint, then would turn around and punish me for drinking and smoking weed, but he would do it in front of me all the time. Really a lot of mixed messages, a lot of chaos and conflict. It was very confusing growing up with him. And, my father introduced me to a certain lifestyle. He got me on a certain track that I had never been introduced to before. I didn't really know my father until I was 13 years old. And then my mom, I guess I had gotten to a point where my mom couldn't really handle me anymore. I was too rebellious and I got expelled from school, and I was getting in a lot of fights, and I was acting out a lot. I wouldn't listen to her, and she sent me to live with my dad. I don't think she knew what else to do with me. And, I had never been exposed to these things before, and my dad introduced me to lifestyle. He exposed me to all of it. I only lived with him for about 5 years, from 13 to 18. And in those 5 years, I became heavily addicted to drugs. I was selling drugs. I was, carrying guns, and just all kinds of stuff. And when I was 19 years old, my dad had thrown me out of the house for using drugs. So, it was interesting. My father introduces me to this lifestyle, sends me down a certain path, and then punishes me and rejects me for being on the path that he put me on. And then I was living in the hood in Lake Worth, Florida, and there was a bad drug deal that had gone down, and I pulled out a gun. And anyway, long story short, police showed up, and I ended up 19 years old, going to jail, looking at 10 years to life for a gun charge. And then my dad abandoned me at that point. He left the state, no visits, no phone calls. 2 years later, I ended up getting out of jail by a miracle. Probably a story for another time, but it was a miracle that I got released after 2 years. I was facing a minimum of 10 when I was initially arrested, and there were just some loopholes and things that I got very lucky. But I called my dad when I got out, and he's like, "Oh, you're out. Cool. Maybe I'll see you again someday." And I remember telling some friends of mine that I called my dad, and he said, "Maybe I'll see you again one day." And my friends were like, "Man, that is cold." And it's funny because, it was so clear to them, and to me, it was normal. I didn't even think it was cold. I just thought that's how it is. So that's my relationship with my dad. And I tried to maintain a relationship with him for a lot of years, and there was a lot that happened, but long story short was I got to a point where I realized that the relationship was just harmful no matter what I tried to do. My dad was just toxic no matter what I tried to do. And at this point, he's become so overtaken by alcoholism that he's barely even coherent anymore. It's been sad to see that unfold. And my mom, my mom was a little bit different. She was 19 years old when I was born, and she was a child. When I was 19 years old, I was in jail, right? So my mom was a child when I was born. And she really did her best in a lot of ways. But my mom got very, very into religion. And like fanatic level. And to the point where it was almost abusive. And I was thinking about this the other day, that my entire childhood, I felt like my mom hated me. Because nothing I did was godly enough for her. She had this standard of, I don't know what she expected for me, at 7 years old to wake up in the morning and start reading the Bible. Like I really don't know what she expected of me, but everything I did was wrong or of the devil in some way. And I was just a normal little boy. And my life was heavily censored, heavily controlled. Like I had no autonomy and no space to even be myself. And when I look at what happened at 13 years old, when I was fighting and getting into trouble and ultimately got expelled from school, I was acting out to the incredible amount of repression that I had felt for every second of my childhood. And I got to an age where I think I realized on some level that she couldn't control me anymore. And I started to visibly rebel. I started to directly ignore what she would say. I was grounded most of my childhood. Like I just remember I would be grounded for 2-3 months at a time. And then I would be off grounding for like a week, and then I would get grounded again. I was grounded for most of my childhood, and it got to the point at, 12, 13 years old where my mom would ground me, and I would just say, I'm going out with my friends, you can't stop me. And I think when it got to the point where she couldn't forcibly control me anymore, that scared her, that terrified her. And the only thing she knew to do was to send me away to live with my dad. A man that I had never met, a man that had never shown up for me before. I mean, I was surprised he even said yes to me coming to live with him, but he did, which was still kind of strange to me. But, here was an alcoholic, drug addict, a man who had no business raising a child. And at 13 years old, I was sent to live with him. And it was wild, the dichotomy between the two, where my mother was super religious. We go to church every Sunday. We say prayer before every meal. Every aspect of my life was scrutinized under this microscope of supposed holiness, which I don't think was holy at all. I think it was righteousness. I think it was control. But I went from this extremely wholesome, extremely sheltered, extremely controlled environment to being dropped off at 13 years old, which is one of the most formative ages of our entire life, with a man who was living in active alcoholism, active drug addiction. I mean, my dad's house, just to give you an idea, it's like a bunch of people would show up at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday night with a 12-pack of beer and a bag of weed, and they'd be up partying till, 2, 3, 4 a.m. sometimes. My dad was not, my dad would do coke sometimes. He wasn't putting needles in his arm or anything like that, but, he was quite involved with drugs and alcohol. And this was the world I was dropped into at a very impressionable age in my life. And I don't say this to judge my parents. I firmly believe that both of them did the best they could with what they had available to them at the time. And when I look at how my dad's life has unfolded and how my mom's life has unfolded, my mom has been in one toxic marriage after another, after another, after another. The abuse that myself and more than me, but my sisters have been exposed to with the men that my mom has brought into their lives. My mom is completely helpless, and she always has been, and her obsession with her religion has been something that has made her feel less helpless in her life, and I can't fault her for that. I get it. My dad was basically left to raise himself with his brothers, and I remember him telling me he had his first beer at 3 years old with his brothers. And, they had no parental figure. He had no mother. His mother wasn't around at all. And he had a father, and his father was basically absent. And it was him and his brothers fending for themselves. And he started drinking at 3 years old. I mean, I can't blame my dad or my mom for who they are and who they've become. But I see this web of generational trauma. I see how it was passed down to my father, how it was passed down to my mother, and how it ultimately got passed down to me. And who knows where it came from? Who knows where it started? Who knows how far back it goes? But this is what I inherited. And my inheritance landed me in jail at 19 years old. And I did 2 years in jail with virtually no support. I was completely alone. And I got out with virtually no support, completely alone. My friend, I can't say no support. I've had some angels in my life, and my best friend from high school, his name is Joey. His mother was actually a support system for me while I was in jail. And she came to court for me on the day of my release, and she told the judge that if I were to be released, that I would have a place to stay and that she would let me stay in her house and help me get a job and things like that. And she was an angel for me, and I lived with her for about 6 months while I was getting some semblance of my life together. And I guess I'm sharing all of this today just to reflect on where I came from. And somehow that 19-year-old kid who was severely addicted to drugs and is an ex-convict, multiple convicted felon, is now a father, and I'll even go as far to say I'm going to be a damn good one. And I think that's a miracle. I think that's a miracle. When I got out of jail, it took me about 6 months to get my shit together on some level, because I started getting high at first and had some conflicts with Joey's mother because she caught on to me and she wanted me out of her house, and I ended up getting this little studio apartment. It was $125 a week to rent this little studio apartment in the back of this guy's house. So I would like go through the sliding glass door in the back of his house, and he had walled off a room, and there was like a little studio, had like I was sleeping on an air mattress, and then there was a little hot plate that I could cook some food on, and a little shower. And I mean, I don't know, the entire place I was living in is smaller than the office I'm sitting in right now. It was tiny little room that I was living in, $125 a week. And I was working, I'd say about 10, 15 miles south in Delray Beach. And so I would get up at 5 a.m. every morning, and I would walk about 2 miles to the bus stop. And then I'd take the bus about the 10, 15 miles down Federal Highway to get to this little phone room I was working in. And I was doing phone sales. And I'd work there from 8 to 3. And then at 3 o'clock, I'd get off, get on the bus, come home, get high, smoking weed at the time. And I would, that was my life. That was what I would do every day. Saturday, Sunday mornings, I'd wake up at 5 a.m. I'd walk to the beach. I'd sit on the beach and smoke a blunt. And that was my whole life. And it was very lonely. It was very, very lonely. At that time, I literally had nobody. And I remember one night, it was my normal routine. I would come home from work, I'd get high, I'd sit there and, cook some dinner, and I'd watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And I was laying on my air mattress, and I had what I would call like a spiritual awakening. And this is something that I can't take credit for this, right? And it's just something that happened. And it was like I started to see my life unfolding before my eyes. And I could see the path that I was on. I could see the track that I was on. And I had a vision of having a wife and a family. And the overarching message that I got in that moment, I was about 21 years old at this time, was that if you don't significantly turn your life around. You will never have any of this. And I guess I just felt like the deep loneliness that I was experiencing at that time in my life. And I just saw so freaking clearly that loneliness was never going to change. That it was never going to go away. And the next day I got sober. There was an AA meeting that was walking distance from my house. And I walked up to the meeting and shared my story and said I needed some help. Then, oddly enough, and these are the little miracles that, we don't really even know until they happen, but I started talking to some of the guys I was working with and telling them that I was trying to get sober. And I didn't know this at the time, but Delray Beach is like the recovery capital of the country. And turns out all the guys I was working with were in recovery. And they became my friends and they started taking me to meetings. And, it was so interesting. Almost overnight, my life became full of life and connection and friendship. And it was all right there, but I wasn't available for it. I was sitting in my house alone every night, getting high. And all that connection was right there. But I wasn't even available for it. And I think that's a lesson we could take away too, right? Like, where is the life we want, the connection we want, the love we want? Where is it sitting right in front of us, but we're just not available to it? I mean, it was amazing. It was overnight. And those were tough years. Those were really, really tough years. I was barely making enough in that phone room to keep a roof over my head. There was a time when my boss had to pay my rent, and he was, helpful guy, and he did. I was walking everywhere. I mean, I would get up at 5 a.m., walk 2 miles to the bus stop, take the bus down to work, get off of work, walk another 5 miles to an AA meeting, then another 5 miles back to the bus stop. I wouldn't get to the bus stop until 10 p.m. I'd catch the last bus home, get home, walk another 2 miles back to my house, crash out, get up at 5 a.m., do it all over again. And that was my life. For 6 months, I did that every single day. It was all I could do just to get to a meeting and try to stay sober. And I got a sponsor and I worked through the steps. And after a while, I started sponsoring people. And that became my life for a long time. And it's interesting how that night, what was compelling enough for me to get sober was the vision of having a wife and a family. And the profound awareness that if I didn't drastically change something about myself, that was never going to happen. And now here I am, almost 20 years later. And that vision is here. And I'm living in it. From the time I made that decision, it took almost 20 years. Maybe more like 15 years. But from the time I made that decision, it took 15 years for the dream to manifest. And I wonder sometimes, where are we becoming impatient because it hasn't happened yet? At any point, in those 15 years, I could have said, this isn't working out for me. Fuck it, I give up. And let's be honest, there were times when maybe I did to a degree. And I thought, I'm going to get sober and I'm going to get a good job and start making money and I'm going to get a girlfriend and be in a good relationship. And it did not happen like that at all. I think back to 16 years old. And this is a story I've shared in this podcast before, but when I was 16 years old, I fell in love for the first time and I had like my heart shattered. Like I'm not proud to say this. It's like I was actually thinking about this. I was driving the other day. I was thinking about this in the car. It's like probably the most pathetic moment of my life. But hey, it's real and I'm not ashamed of it. But my first love, my high school sweetheart, 16 years old, she broke my heart. She cheated on me with a mutual friend of ours. And I remember the night she broke up with me, she just kind of blindsided me out of nowhere. I don't want to be with you anymore. And I was like, what? Like, just came out. I was so unprepared for it. And I didn't even know that she was seeing someone else at the time. I just thought she didn't want to be with me. And I literally got down on my knees crying and begged her not to leave me. Most pathetic moment of my life. And I mean, to add insult to injury, I found out shortly afterwards that she was seeing someone else, a mutual friend of ours. But that's, when I look at my life at that time where I had been sent away from my mom a few years before that, and I was living with my father, who was, as I said, probably a clinical narcissist, and there was no love, no warmth, no safety. It was just a harsh, cold world that I was living in. And she, my girlfriend at that time, she was like the one good thing in my life. And I put my entire sense of safety and security, of worth, of value, of lovability, I put it all in her. Because she was the only loving thing in my life. And when she left me, and especially when I found out about the betrayal, it broke something inside of me. And I think up until that point, I had been kind of keeping my addiction at bay a little bit. I was only really smoking weed and, But something happened and I became cold. I became heartless. And over the next few years, I got severely lost in addiction. For anyone who's familiar, this was when the oxy epidemic was at full swing in South Florida. And I was already selling weed and stuff, and then I ended up getting into selling pills and oxys. And there was a point when I was 17, 18 years old, I was selling hundreds of pills a day. And I was doing 20 to 30 pills a day. And I was heavily addicted. And I lost all hope. I lost all sense of meaning. When I talk about going to jail, it was really grace. Because without that, I would have either overdosed or I would have died in some kind of bad drug deal. I mean, just a few months before going to jail, 2 guys broke into my house in the middle of the night to steal everything I had. They're wearing masks. They held me at gunpoint. They almost beat me to death. They threw me through a glass table that was in my living room, and they left me sitting in a pile of glass, beat me over the head with a pistol until I was borderline unconscious, took everything they could find in my house and left. Lucky they didn't kill me that night. But it was only a matter of time. So jail saved my life in a lot of ways. I don't think I would have made it much longer. Maybe a year if I hadn't gone to jail. But these experiences shaped my blueprint for life, for love, my relationship with my mother, my relationship with my father, and my relationship with my high school girlfriend. I think those 3 relationships shaped my identity. And so if it wasn't, it's like my mother basically hated me and made me think that God hated me. My father taught me that I didn't matter, that he didn't matter, that nobody mattered, that nothing mattered. And then I found my high school girlfriend, who for about a year was like a light in the darkness. And then she betrayed me. And I'm not saying I had no accountability in any of that, by the way. I was a fucking mess. Like, she probably did the right thing, to be honest. But what I internalized from all of this was that I'm basically not worth anything. I'm basically unlovable. My mom hates me. God hates me. There's nothing safe. It's just a cold, harsh world. And yeah, I got sober when I was 21. But my relationship path was chaotic, dark. My first real relationship, really after, like I never really had another relationship for a long time after I was dumped in high school. And my first relationship that I had when I got out of jail was about a year after I got out of jail. She was 42 years old, so twice my age, right? I was 21. Yeah, she's 42 years old. She was a billionaire's daughter who had all kinds of like mental health and just, God bless her. I'm not judging her. I'm just saying how it was. She was a mess. She was like a Machiavellian, like, just twisted game playing. She was in an incredible amount of pain, an incredible amount of suffering. And I just stumbled my way into her world. And, you know, I was with a married woman after that. Another one who just hated her life, was miserable in her marriage, was looking for an escape, and I stumbled into her world. And I really had this weird thing going on where I was like cold and heartless and tough, avoidant, until I fell for someone. And then I was like anxious and desperate. I guess that's what you would call a disorganized attachment style. But I was like being tossed around by all these emotions. And, you know, these were things that I had to work through. These were things that I had to learn through and grow through. And to my credit, and this is what I'll say is, I really did. I look at all the relationships I had, and, you know, I think I learned some powerful lessons from each of them. Like when I met the 42-year-old Machiavellian psychopath, God bless her. I really don't want to say anything bad about her, but it is what it is. When I met her, I felt so unworthy and so unlovable that I was just willing to accept anyone who would pay me any attention. And after about a year of that, I realized that it's better to be alone than to be with someone like that. And I really learned and I really integrated that lesson. And I never accepted that kind of treatment from anyone ever again. I was in a relationship after that with a woman who, she was nice, but I never loved her. I was never in love with her. It was one of those things where we hooked up and then we kept hooking up, and then she really liked me and I felt bad and I didn't want to disappoint her. And I was like, well, maybe this will be good enough. And after about a year of that, like the relationship was just so suffocating that I could not handle it anymore and I had to break it off with her. And I learned that you cannot settle, that settling will never work. And I made a commitment to myself at that point that whoever I'm going to be with, I'm going to be in love with them. But I'm not going to settle. And then there was the married woman. And with her, I learned that integrity is essential. That I cannot be in a relationship with anyone that compromises my integrity. And I never made that mistake again. And there were several other experiences, but when I met my wife, I had consistently learned from every experience that came into my life. And as I said earlier, even if I maybe had some misguided ideas in my mind, I had healed enough through, like I said, 15 years of just constantly working on myself through AA and then through transformational seminars and coaching and therapy. And just, I had done an intense amount of work on myself for 15 years. And I got to the point when I met my wife where I knew a few fundamental things. I knew that I was worthy of love. I had a high opinion of myself, which is something I had never had before. I had learned all these lessons about integrity and not settling and having standards. And I knew that I wanted to feel safe. And when I met my wife, it was like all of the lessons that I had learned became like they were reflected in her. And I was a full body yes. Any of the fear, the hesitation, or it just wasn't there. Anything that I had had in any other relationship, it just wasn't there. And this is the journey that I went on to finally be where I am today, to be prepared to be a father, to be prepared to nurture this soul. There's actually more because my wife and I have been together for 9 years. So there's more. But I think maybe that's all I have time for today. But if you made it this far in the episode, I just want to say thank you for listening. This has been kind of stream of consciousness. Just, it is what it is. It's my diary. And I'm letting you read it. But I want to do this, and I want to continue to do this because, like I said, I want to give a glimpse behind the curtain. Who is the man behind the message? I show up here every week and I give you tools and advice and insights and tell you what I think you should do according to me, apparently. And I know a lot of you get value out of that. And I hear constantly how much you love the podcast and how much it supports you. So thank you. Thank you, first of all. Just thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying, and I'm so grateful you get value out of it. But I think it's important that if you're going to listen to what I have to say, that you know who it is you're listening to. And especially as I cross this threshold into maybe the biggest commitment of my life, that it's important to document that journey in some way. It's important to be able to share what's unfolding for me as I step into this new phase of who I am. And so thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening again. If you've made it this far, I hope it was valuable. I hope there's something that you can take away from this that is going to be powerful for you in your life. And so I'm going to keep coming back each week with the typical kind of episodes, conscious relationship, talking about your major concerns, your major challenges, the topics and the conversations that are going to serve you most in what you're really dealing with in your life. But once a month, I want to pause that and just share a little bit about where I am and what's going on for me and what I'm learning, how I'm growing. So you can see not only the advice I have to give, but how I embody and practice that in my own life. One last thing I do want to say in closing, part of this new threshold is not only about stepping into a new level as a father, but also stepping into a new level as a coach and bringing a new level of depth and presence to my work. And so if you listen to the podcast, you've probably heard me talk about the Inspired Love program quite a bit. I mean, I mention it quite often. It's been my signature program that I've been doing for, 5 years now, something like that. I've had hundreds of students go through it at this point. We've had an overwhelming amount of just incredible feedback. My assistant Rami was just doing interviews with our recent graduates, and they're just, I'll post some of the interviews soon, but the graduates have just been, raving about their experience with the program. And, I'm just grateful, right? I'm just grateful to be able to do something that's meaningful and serves. But part of what I've been looking at in stepping into this new chapter is increasing the value of the program and adjusting the structure of it a little bit. So you get more hands-on time with me, evolving the curriculum. So the curriculum is really succinct and potent, and I've distilled over the last 5 years that I've been doing it, I've distilled the most important parts and really highlighted them. So, the program is being perfected. And I'm adjusting the structure and the nature of it so that you get more direct time with me and that we get to work more closely together. And just doing a lot to really evolve it and make it truly valuable, truly powerful. And the new version of the program launches on September 2nd. And so if you're listening to this right now, have about a month, a little less than a month, if you want to take advantage of this new version of the program. And what we're doing is up until September 2nd, we're going to honor the old price of the program. And then on September 2nd, we're going to raise the price to reflect the added value and the added experience. So if you want to work with me, if it's something that you've been interested in or has been on your mind, if you want to get the new version of me that's stepping into this new chapter of my life, and if you want to be a part of that, then take this opportunity. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes below where you're listening to this, and you can book an intro call there. So the intro call is no commitment, just an opportunity to get to know a little bit about the program, answer any questions you have. We offer special pricing on the call, so you can take advantage of that. And if you're interested in taking your journey to a deeper level and diving in with me and getting the value from the Inspired Love program that hundreds of past students have received, I'd love to have you. I'd love to have you step into this new chapter with me, and let's do it together. So I'm going to leave the link in the show notes right below where you're listening to this. Make sure to check it out there. Aside from that, thank you for being with me today in my very first diary entry. I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed sharing and letting you in on a little bit more of my journey. And I look forward to continuing to do that as we grow together and as this podcast grows. So thank you. Love and blessings. Wishing you everything you want for yourself. That's what I want for you. And I'll see you back here next week. Take care, everybody. Thank you for listening today. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.